There's probably no one in all of AI who understands power and power supply and compute supply at the level of depth that Chase does right now. And so it's incredible listening to him talk about how he's bringing those two things together.
So today's guest is Chase Lochmiller. He is the CEO of Crusoe. Crusoe most recently raised over $1.3 billion in their Series E. They are worth over $10 billion. The company has been on an absolute tear, sitting at the intersection. Two of the most important things in our world today, AI and power.
The Compute 100 is a podcast about the most consequential market in AI.
These are the conversations with builders and investors about the technology and the capital powering the greatest infrastructure build-out ever.
I'm Brian Schechter.
I'm Gabby Lorenzi.
We're investors at Primary.
Let's dive in to the Compute 100. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice or an offer to buy or sell any securities.
Welcome to the podcast. We're thrilled to have you here.
Excited to be here.
Chase, what is the path to Crusoe becoming $1 trillion company?
I mean, look, I think sometimes there's like a right place, right time element for a business. And we've sort of, Crusoe's always taken this energy first approach to developing compute infrastructure and building things at, really large scale. We happen to have found ourselves at, the convergence of two of the largest industries that have ever existed in human history, energy and computing. And to me, it's actually not that crazy of a path to think about Crusoe as $1 trillion company. It is, frankly, being able to ride this very large wave and being a critical infrastructure provider to managing intelligence for the global economy. And I think there are going to be numerous, trillion or multi-trillion dollar companies built in this ecosystem. And I think Crusoe is a very good path to becoming one of them.
And so, I mean, I'm sure at some point we'll get into the origins, but I'd love to just kind of continue on this. What is the unique energy insight or insights?
Well, I think, look,
that's different from CoreWeave.
Sure,
et cetera.
Sure, I think as a business, we from the early foundations of the company, I felt that at scale, energy becomes a bottleneck. And therefore, we should be taking an energy-first approach. And if you look at like previous generations of GPUs that actually had like lower cost, lower NVIDIA gross margin, and the key operating expense for operating large clusters of GPUs is actually power. And so if you could actually dramatically reduce your overall power costs, it actually reduces your total cost of ownership of computing infrastructure and intelligence infrastructure. And so that led us to saying like, okay, well, for most of these use cases, you don't need to be co-located exactly at the same place where, some web application is being hosted. In fact, for the more computationally complex things, latency becomes less of a bottleneck because you're compute bound, you're not network bound. And what that leads to is a philosophy of saying, okay, where can I build something where I can access low cost, abundant energy? And we've taken an approach of trying to have a bend towards cleaner energy as well. And that ends up in us building in remote locations that haven't historically been data center markets, but are very rich in energy resources. Places like Abilene, Texas, or Amarillo, Texas, or West Texas broadly, and a number of other markets throughout the United States.
We can go somewhere where there's a ton of energy. That's a lot of wind, right?
Yeah. So look, I think there's areas of the world that just naturally are windier or sunnier when you think about the renewables. Abilene, Texas, for instance, the reason we went there was that a lot of renewables had been built there, and the problem they had in that market was actually that power prices were frequently negative because there was so little demand for power, and there's been such a large investment in wind generation because it's so consistently windy there. And wind developers were incentivized by production tax credits where they get paid to produce and sell renewable energy independent of if there's real demand. And that led to kind of this negative pricing.
Interesting.
And we said, look, have I got a solution for you, buddy? We have something that actually requires a ton of demand for power, which is this AI infrastructure. And I think it makes sense in the sense of like, if a wind turbine costs X, wouldn't you want to be building it in the place where you're producing power 55% of the time versus 20% of the time? Similarly speaking, like with solar, you want to build solar where it's sunny. It sounds dumb, but like it's as simple as that, right? You don't want to build rooftop solar in San Francisco where it's cloudy and overcast all the time. Building it in a market like West Texas where it's very consistently sunny and you get high capacity factors from that infrastructure investment in solar, it makes a lot of sense. And so that's what's led us to various markets. I mean, there's other constraints that come into this in terms of permitting and where generation is available, where gas is available and low cost. Ultimately, that led us to building in these types of markets. And we've been building some of the largest AI infrastructure in the world through these very rich energy resources.
Is that going to run out as an insight? Like how do you continue to stay ahead with this energy focus?
We're always kind of staying at the cutting edge of a lot of different things, whether it's, energy generation is one aspect of things, but, there's so many different elements that go to this, right? I think new energy technology, we're always continuing to stay at the forefront of, whether it's helping bring to market new forms of gas generation. We actually announced a big partnership with Boom Supersonic, who was building supersonic aircraft. And they basically took a lot of the innovations that they had built in developing these supersonic jet turbines. And we said, hey, what if we use that jet turbine to produce power for AI data centers instead of, supersonic jet travel?
Wow.
And they said, that's awesome. And we partnered with Blake Scholl, who's a great CEO and amazing entrepreneur, to help them bring to market a power product that's using that same supersonic jet engine to produce power for data centers.
It just so happens that that's like a great power producer.
Yeah, I mean, it's the history of power production, right? I mean, that's what GE does. GE Aerospace that produces the jet turbines for big aircraft is the same reason that GE Vernova came out of that same class of turbines. It's the same playbook with a new type of company. It's actually more so the case with supersonic jet turbines. And one of the reasons for that is the engineering process they went through for these supersonic jet turbines it is meant to actually have a higher temperature air intake because of the speed of the planes. And what that results in is in a market like West Texas, where it's very hot, traditional gas turbines will actually take a D rate. So you'll actually have to say, like, if it's a 20 megawatt turbine, when it's really, really hot in Texas, if it's 110 degrees, you will only be able to generate 16 megawatts of power, 15 megawatts of power. But these supersonic jet turbines actually are designed to have very high temperature inlet because of the high pressure. And we actually take less of a D rate. So it's actually, it's beneficial in certain ways.
And that's also combining with real supply chain constraints on just traditional turbines.
Exactly. So, I mean, our goal in partnering with them was like, how do we help bring a new, turbine manufacturer to market that can help, drive down costs for us and sort of, expand the amount of power that can be produced for AI infrastructure.
So like part of like the DNA of Crusoe is like we know how to identify power opportunities that are non-obvious that will allow us to like create an efficiency on top of something that's already available. I mean, that's like,
I think the company has an energy first DNA.
Yeah.
Like, this has come across in, we did something with Redwood Materials, who, listeners may or may not be familiar with, but Redwood was a company started by the co-founder of Tesla, J.B. Strobel, with a focus on recycling batteries. Like sort of end-of-life EV batteries. How do you, when you have these huge fleets of EVs and over time as they lose their charge capacity, what do you do with the batteries, trying to recycle that lithium, all the different components. Well, we did something with them where we're actually taking, we actually built the largest microgrid in the United States. So it's off-grid solar plus these end-of-life EV batteries that still have a valuable amount of charge in them. And we're able to basically power a data center fully off-grid with solar plus batteries. And because they're these end-of-life EV batteries that have already been used, already been monetized, already been amortized once, the overall cost of this is actually cheaper than the grid power price in Northern Virginia.
Wow.
So we're able to do this at we're doing it at sort of a pilot scale, but again, it's the largest microgrid in the United States. But it's not. Our hope is to scale it up quite a bit. So it's examples like this where we believe that we're doing things that other people aren't even thinking about, and part of it is just frankly, it's in our DNA.
Yeah.
There were three things you just talked about Abilene has lower, if not negative, power prices that made it really opportunistic to build. You have Boom, supersonic, and using those turbines. And then you have this Redwood materials collaboration. Those three things seem like you just walked into the most perfect storm of opportunities and all the other things that Crusoe is doing to be energy first. If you look back 5 years, could you even have imagined that this would have worked out as well as it has?
Maybe that, I think my answer is yes. As like an entrepreneur, you're sort of like this, like hopelessly optimistic in all scenarios.
This is how it'll
believe,
end.
even if it seems completely irrational to other people, you believe the future is going to exist in some way.
Yeah.
And this was honestly the future that I believed would exist, is that energy would become a bottleneck and AI would become embedded in all aspects of the economy, and the compute scaling needs would be enormous.
Yeah.
I was actually reflecting on, there's a blog post by this guy, Tim Urban. I don't know if you guys ever read his blog, Wait But Why, but he had this whole blog post on like the road to AGI. And this was like formative in my view of the world in the 2015 era, like reading the Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil early on. But all of those philosophies had this notion that compute, in order to get to superintelligence, compute was the bottleneck, and the bottleneck for compute was power. Yeah. And so those two things went hand in hand: compute, power, and data. Do we have enough of those things? If we have enough of those things, we can sort of achieve superhuman capabilities through digital intelligence.
There's this additional move, which is about the efficiency of power and finding opportunities. I mean, I would love for you to talk about the first data center that you got going with the offshoots from the gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was another example of taking this energy first approach to things, and honestly, the Bitcoin ecosystem is a very efficient ecosystem in terms of seeking out low-cost energy resources to power computing infrastructure. It's it was the first manifestation of this trade, right? Go seek out low-cost power and then use that power to produce SHA-256D hashes to secure and validate transactions on the Bitcoin network. And when we started the business, frankly, I didn't have a background in energy. It's really my co-founder that has the background in energy. I sort of came from this background of AI and computing and cryptocurrency. And, when we started the business, it was actually after the two of us were we were on this climbing trip together in the Rocky Mountains. And we spent pretty much the whole day with him educating me on this process of natural gas flaring. And I was so mind blown by this notion that a company would basically burn off this waste product, and it would happen 24/7, and it's something that has value in one context, but in this other context it's a nuisance. It's a waste product. It's a thing that you have to manage. It's a liability. And really what's happening there, just for the education of the listeners here, is a oil company will drill a well for oil, and what comes out of the ground is a combination of three things: natural gas, water, and oil. And the oil and the water can be separated into these tanks, and those you can bring trucks to the site that then truck the water to a water treatment facility, truck the oil to an oil refinery. But the gas, unless you have access to a pipeline because it's in gaseous state, the best and most economic thing to do with it is to actually just light it on fire. You just burn it off. That whole concept really blew my mind. And it was only when I first saw it in action, when I went out to the oil field with my co-founder and I saw these giant fireballs in the middle of nowhere. And I'm like, holy crap, like what, they just do this 24/7?
And you were just like, let's put a data center here.
He was like, yeah. And I was like, man, this is insane. And exactly, I said, let's, the key metric of profitability in Bitcoin mining and, for computing more broadly is going to be energy costs.
Yeah.
And so our first application was basically building these mobile and modular data centers that would be co-located alongside this waste energy resource. And then we brought power generation to site. So we were actually managing our own power generation, our own data center infrastructure, and operating it in these remote, very hard to operate conditions in the oil field. And we built a business that, scaled that to more than 200 megawatts and serving some of the biggest companies in the world, folks like Exxon. And it was a very successful, growth of energy first computing platform.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I want to know so right now Jensen is saying that compute equals revenue. And we're like moving into a world where the sort of connection between compute tokens and sort of economically valuable productive output is getting more and more clear. That's sort of an incredible framing for why we want more and more data centers. Mm-hmm. You said a few things that point to like you sort of being on this from the early days, like the sort of 2010s and thinking about AI. What about AI then were you seeing that compute would be so central and so important for the world?
That's a good question. I guess my
And you were at MIT, is that right?
I was at MIT and then Stanford for grad school in computer science and AI. And then I was working in the quant trading space. And the quant trading space is this interesting ecosystem of researchers that are not often publicly publishing things. They're sort of behind the scenes, consuming a lot of cutting edge research and trying to adopt new cutting edge research to produce better, more valuable predictions than the rest of the market. And in that domain, we were, my original role, we were building a lot of forecasts for security returns. And my job was honestly a lot of feature engineering, right? So we would build these features, oftentimes built on economic relationships and using a lot of like physics-based models that would say, okay, if this security goes up, we sort of expect this security to do that. And here's how we're going to model it. We're going to look at a lot of data historically, and then we're going to use more classical machine learning techniques to try to fit a model to kind of this economically driven, idea. Things like linear regression, logistic regression over these like complex engineered features, right? When deep learning, like the boom in deep learning that happened after the publishing of the AlexNet paper and convolutional neural networks and recurrent neural networks and some of the time series based mechanisms of thinking through, predicting the next token in a sequence, that really re-architected a lot of our thinking, and we started experimenting a lot with these deep learning based approaches to quant. And that led me down sort of this path of both exploring deep learning as a mechanism to produce alpha for the quant finance space, as well as like exploring a lot of other things in my personal free time around computer vision and natural language processing that I just found to be really, really fascinating problems to work on. And that was kind of, and then we shifted these workloads from CPUs to GPUs. And I was like, wow, we're starting to consume a lot of power with these GPUs, like take a lot more power than a CPU. And, you need more data center infrastructure to make this happen. And, it was sort of at that point where I felt like with pretty high conviction that like AI was this like meta science that like, it's not one thing that it helps with, right? It's literally improves every industry. Every industry that produces data, which is to say every single industry, can be made better and can be improved by AI and artificial intelligence, driving efficiencies, creating better predictions, aiding in the sort of human aspect of a lot of these industries. And so I had this like pretty strong early conviction that AI was going to be embedded in every aspect of the economy.
Cool.
Maybe taking a step back, I'm thinking about like, this discussion of the flaring piece.
Yeah.
And there's maybe like one thing I want to hit on
Please.
that
Go
I
for it.
didn't touch on. So, I think there's like two important characteristics when you think about our early days of taking this energy first approach to computing with flare gas. One was that we were taking an inherently energy first approach where we said, let's build computing infrastructure and bring computing to where we can access low cost, abundant energy. That's number one. Number two was we actually thought through the computing problem as a modular problem. We built these mobile and modular data centers that were initially housing Bitcoin mining equipment. And then we actually had our first GPU-based modular data center that was deployed in the oil field, powered off of flare gas in like the 2019, 2020 timeframe. And we were inherently thinking about the computing problem as the composition of these modular components. And I think today, as we look forward into the future and the scaling of AI, the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built, inherently it has to happen on a modular basis. And we sort of think about that both in the development of these very large AI factories, like multiple gigawatts, like what we're doing in Abilene, Texas, where what you're doing is you're building something and then you're repeating it over and over and over again. So you can actually create these modular building blocks, manufacture them in high volume in a concentrated factory, ship those components to site, and you're doing less on-site construction and more on-site assembly. It's sort of like a IKEA type model or a Lego based model where you have these individual building blocks that you're putting together. The second is we believe that the future of AI infrastructure is going to have this barbell where you have these big concentrated giant AI factories of like multiple gigawatts, and then you're going to have smaller AI factories that are hundreds of kilowatts to small number of megawatts, widely dispersed everywhere. And that's going to be serving the scaling of inference and the scaling of the inference economy as demand for tokens grows at an exponential rate.
Man, there's a lot of things to talk about.
Sorry.
Something I would love to know is, what did your seed stage deck look like? What was the business when
That's a good transition because I wanted to get to like some entrepreneurship questions.
what did it look like when you were going to just go put data centers next to gas flares?
That was kind of the pitch. And we were like, look, we have this, because so an important aspect of the business is we actually so I funded the initial like MVP, right? So basically
and the MVP was the modular data center.
It was a small modular data center. We worked with an electrical fabrication shop to basically build out this initial data center that we were using for Bitcoin mining.
What compute was in there? What type of hardware was in it?
They were ASICs. So they were ASICs designed for Bitcoin mining. And what we did was, we felt Bitcoin was sort of the fastest path to monetization. But from the seed stage, I had always felt like the bigger opportunity was going to be an AI infrastructure. It was also the thing that I was personally more interested in. Like I feel like Bitcoin, AI are like my two loves, but like AI, like I love more than Bitcoin or something like that. I don't know. Love all your children equally. I don't know. The thesis around the seed investment was that we had executed this first piece, and we actually got an oil company to say yes to like, okay, these guys can come out here and flaring is a problem for me, and they can take my flare gas and run these modular generators and power their data center. And so we had that stood up by the time we were raising our seed round. Oh, wow. And so, so our seed deck was like basically focused on scaling that opportunity in Bitcoin and then hopefully building out an AI platform that was an energy first approach.
Were the gas companies charging you at the time, or the oil and gas companies charging you at the time for that waste?
Yeah, so this is one of the interesting facets of the business. Our very first deal, the gas was just free.
Yeah.
So it was just like, just take the gas, and that actually helped solve a problem for me. Yeah. Shortly thereafter, I sort of took the approach that like, if this thing was going to fail, I wanted it to fail like pretty fast and then like move on with my life and like go do the next thing. And so I said, look, if flaring is truly a problem for these oil companies, they should be willing to pay us. Mm-hmm. This gas that that they're burning off. If it's an environmental liability for them, or there's some constraints from a regulatory standpoint or an emission standpoint, or a something that's actually bad for them, they should be willing to pay us to get rid of this problem for them. And so the initial set of contracts that we signed, we were actually getting paid a service fee to take the gas off the hands of the oil companies. And there's this, you actually have to have a handoff of the commodity, because there's all these mineral rights that are owned by the royalty owners. So our contracts were typically, we would pay 1 cent for the gas, and then we would get paid this big service fee for deploying the equipment and providing the service of flare mitigation.
Wow. Okay. So seed stage pitch deck is, we've tested this out, we've done it, and we need to scale this. We need to make it a lot bigger.
We need to scale it, and we're going to expand into other new frontiers like AI.
Into AI. And so you started Crusoe with one of your high school friends, correct?
Yep. So I started Crusoe with a high school friend of mine, Koli Kavnis. He's my co-founder, and known him for a long time now.
Amazing. And so you guys raise your seed round. What comes next? What was that kind of journey to Series A? And what time frame was this? What year was that?
So we started the company in 2018. And that's so I put up the first money. And that gave us enough to go. So I invested $600,000 personally. And that was enough for us to go through this design process, build out this first modular data center, buy a bunch of ASICs, run our day-to-day operations. I wasn't paying myself anything or whatever, but it was enough to, kind of get us through that initial development phase. We raised a seed round that was with Founders Fund and Bain Capital Ventures as the two primary investors in that round, with a bunch of other friends and family and a number of other funds. Between that and Series A, it was really is there a real, it's they did this once.
Yeah.
Can they do it again? Is there a real demand from oil companies to actually solve this problem of flaring? And we expanded the number of basins we were involved in. So our first deployment was in Wyoming. We then got into the Bakken in North Dakota, which was the second largest flaring basin in the United States. We ended up signing some big deals with big customers. And honestly, it was one of these things where if I could ever get someone to go on a field trip with me, they were totally sold.
Yeah.
If I got someone into the field and they drove around the Bakken with me, they were like, holy shit, there's so much gas being burned off with no beneficial use. This is totally insane. We should turn all this into Bitcoin. We should turn all this into, computing cycles for more valuable use cases. And, I think people would just see it. It was a very visual experience. And then they saw the moat, which is that it was difficult. You're often operating in these very challenging conditions. So if we could figure out how to operationalize hard things, that would actually create a huge strategic advantage for us over the course of time.
Fascinating. Okay. And so you started to scale up. You're starting to show value through the Bitcoin, or, repeatable value through Bitcoin. The business today, what percentage is still Bitcoin versus AI?
We sold our Bitcoin business.
Okay.
So 0.
Okay.
We are still a large shareholder in a privately held company called NYDIG, which is where who we sold our Bitcoin business to. We basically, at some point, there was this whole period of, around our Series A, in fact, a lot of investors were like, holy cow, your Bitcoin economics are incredible. Why are you screwing around with this AI thing? And it was well, that's the thing. That's what I care about. That's what I want to do. I view this as an opportunity. This is what Chase wants to do. If you want to invest at this stage, that's kind
deal
of
with it.
what I'm going to do. So I think there was a lot of early, a lot of folks early on that just doubted that AI was going to be an opportunity, and wanted us to just focus entirely on the Bitcoin ecosystem. And my commitment was look, I view there's a huge opportunity in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and I want to build this whole thing in AI, and it's very, very important to me. And so, for a while, our AI cloud platform business was sort of Chase's side project experiment that was like happening within Crusoe. And, over time, that sort of the ChatGPT moment was kind of this like shot heard around the world. And, we'd sort of been building this platform, and we launched our AI cloud platform publicly to paying customers early in 2022. After, years of sort of experimentation and product development and figuring out what we wanted to build. And then, of course, after that moment, there was just sort of this insatiable demand for the type of compute infrastructure that we've been building for years.
No longer your side project.
No longer became the main show.
It is the show.
It just, it scaled so quickly, and folks just recognize, and sorry, it scaled very quickly, and, we kind of found ourselves in this position of having two big businesses, right? Two businesses with, 9-figure revenue streams. And there were investors that would come to it and say, like, Bitcoin's such a polarizing thing. I still don't understand exactly why, but I might, whatever. There's all the publicly held reasons, but like, it is such a polarizing thing for certain investors, where certain investors would come to us and say, I love what you're doing in AI, but we can't invest in anything that's related to Bitcoin. Or I love what you're doing in Bitcoin. I don't really know anything about AI. And so we kind of had these two companies existing under one roof. And we said, you know what? I think at this point, we just felt like it made sense to be entirely focused on the opportunity we were seeing in the AI landscape. And, as we were sort of developing, this giant, largest data center in the world, we said, you know what, we should be entirely focused on this single opportunity.
Like, give us a map of the Crusoe universe right now in terms of power, GPUs. I want to learn about Abilene and how complex that is, but first, just like, what's the universe?
What's the universe? Yeah, so Crusoe is a vertically integrated business, and we're a vertically integrated AI infrastructure business. And the reason we chose to take that approach is that this landscape is such a dynamic landscape, and it's moving so quickly. The number of different bottlenecks and what those bottlenecks are, and they evolve and they change over the course of time, that being vertically integrated provides you this dynamic advantage where you can actually remove these barriers by being able to do them yourself, by being able to control your own destiny. By being able to build your own data centers, build your own power plants, build your own electrical switchgear, power distribution centers, so that you can stand up the infrastructure needed to power the intelligence demands. Being able to deploy large clusters of GPUs and manage, different networking architectures on the back end. Being able to find different ways of monetizing that infrastructure has been a critical aspect to our core strategy. Where we have built out an infrastructure as a service business that's really focused on selling to folks that want to manage the infrastructure directly, but they really need core infrastructure engineering teams to be able to manage large clusters of GPUs.
So just to understand that, I'm assuming like that's the hyperscalers, labs who say we want to manage the infrastructure ourselves, but we need someone who's going to like install it, monitor the power. Is that?
So we don't actually, that product, we're not focused on selling to the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers have their own version of that product, right? Like EC2 or whatever it is. We're focused on selling that directly to a lot of the AI innovators that are managing this infrastructure directly. There are further abstractions away from the infrastructure that's more focused on developers. As opposed to infrastructure engineers, that are things like our managed inference product, our managed fine tuning product, kind of these further layers of abstraction that enable developers to build and scale applications. So we sort of, as a business, we vertically integrated. I kind of view it as like 3 core ways of monetizing. Like, one is renting data centers, like where we'll just rent a data center. In that case, we're like a landlord, and we're basically renting capacity on a $1 per kW per month basis. There is a renting infrastructure, where we're renting access to GPUs and manage clusters of GPUs on a dollar per GPU hour basis. And then finally, there's the managed services where, you know, the key metric is like a dollar per token basis, right? So it's like we can sell things on dollar per KW, dollar per GPU hour, dollar per token. Those are like the three motions. And really our goal is to deliver the product that's most valuable to customers across the ecosystem. So when we think about the hyperscalers, which you mentioned earlier, our goal is to, you know, we don't want to sell them GPUs, right? They have lower cost of capital than us. They know how to build GPU clusters in a way that like fits with their own core platform. We want to meet them at the point of like most value to them, which is actually the data center.
And like the data center, and I got the power for you.
Exactly.
Yep.
So this purpose-built AI data center that's at the scale and, you know, high density design that's like outfitted for, you know, whether it's NVIDIA gear or, you know, whatever their core, you know, technology is. Like we want to be able to deliver data centers for them because that's their critical bottleneck. The innovators, right? The labs, the application companies, a lot of the AI infrastructure businesses, they want managed infrastructure and they want managed services on top of that infrastructure. So those are the products that we're really focused on delivering to, you know, those key application companies.
And what's the spread between those products for you right now? I know a bit about the inference one because that's the newest for you guys.
It is the newest.
The Atero boys.
It is the newest one. You know, I think on a revenue basis, our cloud infrastructure as a service business is bigger than our data center business. But on a total contracted value basis, our data center business is bigger, if that makes sense.
Because it's for longer periods?
It's for longer periods, but it also, I don't know, they're both quite large at this point, and they're both growing.
And so Abilene, which has been in the news a ton.
Yep.
I have not been able to follow because there are so many different players who are involved there. You've got Oracle, OpenAI, SoftBank. You've been in the center of a lot of attention. What has it been like navigating that for you? And give us what you can about like what is the state of Abilene today and who's it for?
Yeah. So the things that we've announced in Abilene. So there was a first phase of build out that was for Oracle and OpenAI, which was 1.2 gigawatts of total power capacity. And just putting that number in, you know, perspective, like the city of Denver, where, you know, I grew up, is roughly powered on like 1 gigawatt ish, right? So you're talking about like a Denver power envelope.
And how many GPUs is that ish?
It's a little over 400,000 of Blackwells. So it's kind of the latest generation from NVIDIA. Vera Rubin is sort of, you know, launching, call it later this year or early next year.
And do you arrive at that 1.2 number from, it sounds like power wasn't the bottleneck in Abilene, but do you arrive at that from how many Blackwells you can procure? Like, I've always been curious the math to triangulate, because everybody obviously wants that to be as high as possible, but there's complexity that comes in driving that higher. So how do you arrive at 1.2?
That was what we were able to get approved via ERCOT.
Okay, so it's a regulatory, it was a regulatory thing.
Not entirely. So so here's the construct there. There was we have an energy partner there called Lancium. Lancium had built a 200 megawatt substation there. And I would have been very familiar with this project, and I'd known the founder of Lancium very well for many years because he was initially developing this as a Bitcoin mining campus. And, you know, as we were getting into some of these conversations around very large scale AI data centers to be built out, I called him up and I said, Michael, his name's Michael McNamara. And I said, Michael, do you still have that, you know, campus available? And he said, yeah, we actually just finished this 200 megawatt substation. It's there, it's ready to go. And, you know, it's just waiting for someone to, you know, take the power. And I said, great.
Sign us up.
I'm very interested in that. And I said, what else do you have coming? He said, well, we have an approved 1 gigawatt load application in place with ERCOT, and you know, the FEA has been, you know, issued, and that's been approved and it's going to be energized, around this date. And I said, fantastic. I want that too. So that 1 gigawatt substation is now developed. And again, it's the largest privately owned substation in the United States. Wow. So that first 1.2 gigawatts is all supporting Oracle and OpenAI. And that's what we're building for this generation of chip.
And what's Oracle bringing to the table there? They're bringing the chips and the building out of the servers and some financing for it? Is that?
Oracle's our customer, right? Oracle, like the construct of the deal is that we have a long-term lease with Oracle, right? So we have a 15-year lease with Oracle. Oracle has a contract with OpenAI that, is whatever their relationship with OpenAI, but it's a shorter term contract than 15 years.
Okay. And so you have another 800 gigawatts coming online.
Another 900 megawatts. Yeah.
900 megawatts.
Yeah, 9 gigawatts.
800 gigawatts.
800 gigawatts.
Yeah. 900 megawatts to get you to 2 gigawatts.
It's 2.1.
2 gigawatts. Yeah. Okay.
So, and that expansion, that 900 megawatt expansion, is actually going to Microsoft. So that is what we announced recently, that we're doing this big expansion in the Abilene campus with Microsoft.
And so you guys, Crusoe is going to go public?
It's something we're looking at. We look at all forms of financing. The public markets are, definitely for a business that requires as much capital as ours, the public markets are definitely something that, has appeal to it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that's so fascinating about Abilene is there's so many parties involved in terms of you guys get this front row seat about how this all comes together. Lancium was there first in terms of what they had built, and then you guys can come and really bridge their product to the hyperscalers, their customers, et cetera. What is it like to be in that seat and to be able to see across, providing an opportunity for Lancium to monetize, but then also serving the real demand that's coming from the hyperscalers and doing that all in a place like Abilene, which is an atypical place to build a data center? Just love to learn more about what that's like.
Yeah, I think for us, it's been fascinating to both learn and teach these big tech companies about infrastructure. And I think we've been able to learn a ton from a lot of our big tech partners. And I think that's one of the benefits we've had about, having this data center product that we're selling to these very big tech companies and then also building for Crusoe Cloud, right? So when I think about that piece of the business, my customers are, the biggest 6 tech companies in the world and Crusoe, right? And so by actually serving those customers and understanding their needs, their requirements, how they think about developing that infrastructure layer, it's been like the greatest learning experience of all time.
Yeah.
And we're able to channel all of that learning and innovation towards delivering great products for them, as well as great products for ourselves, for Crusoe and our cloud platform. From an energy perspective, I think we've actually been able to educate a lot of the big tech companies around, power, around on-site generation, the whole gas generation movement that's like taken place where, Elon started using gas turbines and, a lot of people are thinking about off-grid, behind the meter, power generation requirements. It's become a big hot topic in the White House in terms of, and this has become a hot topic, in the public sector as well, with the ratepayer protection pledge and big tech companies promising to basically pay their own way for new power generation that needs to come online to support their, infrastructure use cases. We've been a leader in that. We've been sort of, at the forefront of bringing your own power.
Yeah.
Of building things that you need to energize your computers.
Yeah.
And so I think in a lot of ways we've been able to educate, a lot of these big tech companies around the energy needs of, scaled AI infrastructure. And, I think it's been a very mutually beneficial, relationship and dynamic in that way.
That's awesome. So I listened to an interview of yours, and it sounds like there's about 7,000 people working in Abilene. Is that true in terms of contractors? And this is a little while ago. So update us on how many people are on the ground, because there's another really interesting kind of public narrative around how constrained we are in terms of the people that can help build these data centers, the electricians, the people who can actually do operations. I would love to get a picture of what the Abilene workforce looks like and
So
how you're building that.
the Abilene workforce had actually peaked out around 9,000 people.
Wow. And that's all contractors who are doing everything from land, electricity, installation.
A lot of it's electricians, a lot of it's plumbers, a lot of it's, construction workers that are, pouring concrete, laying conduit, doing a lot of work to basically bring the site to life. And, that's in Abilene, Texas, where the population is 120,000 people, right? So if you talk about bringing 9,000 people to a site, we had to build a parking lot that looks like a, NFL stadium parking lot, just so that we could have all these people have a place to park when they come to work every day. But I would say one of the things that we're thinking through is increasingly, how do we make that, instead of 9,000 people, how do we make it 2,000 people? Mm-hmm. And the way, but still maintain the same speed, speed to market advantages that we've sort of created. And the way we're thinking through that is honestly this modular approach to building things, right? And sort of the more things we can do offsite, the less it creates a labor pinch point, especially in building in these rural locations. So, Abilene is, 120,000 people. We have another project that's, out near Amarillo, Texas, in a town called Claude, Texas. Believe it or not, Claude, spelled the exact same way.
Too good to be
Claude's
true.
a town of 1,500 people. Right?
Wow.
Amarillo's close enough where we can tap into the labor market.
You're gonna need to build a little more than a parking lot.
Exactly. It's like, there's we're a very large, we're a very large portion of the population in Claude, Texas. So I think what's important for us is that, as this whole thing unfolds, being able to actually create these modular building blocks that you can assemble on site instead of creating more construction burden. It actually shifts the people bottleneck away from the site and into factories. And these factory jobs that we're creating, they're actually great jobs, right? So we have factories in Tulsa, we have factories in Denver, and this is electricians that are going into the same factory, working normal work hours. They can go home, have dinner with their families, and they're not having to relocate to these remote rural locations every couple years as, new projects move around. And so we think that's a more scalable approach to the labor required to meet the demands of, not just our AI infrastructure needs, but the market's AI infrastructure needs. And so, I think, labor is definitely a bottleneck, but I think it's easier to accomplish in a market like Tulsa than, these remote West Texas towns.
I want to hear about the entrepreneur challenge, but I also want to be sure we get some time to talk about your view on the sort of economics of what's happening in the CapEx build out for AI right now. And there is, I would say, a lot of concern of where is the money going to come from to keep on the pace that we're on right now of bigger and bigger data centers.
I think a lot of people are worried about this value creation point. I'm just it's not something that worries me that much. And part of it is one, I think when you look at the CapEx and where it's coming from, a lot of it originates in some form or another from the biggest tech companies, the biggest companies that have ever existed, the best balance sheets that have ever existed. And they're not committing near term, they're committing for decades, right? So, our contract with Microsoft, it's a 20-year contract. It's 2 decades. And, Microsoft does more than just sell AI, right? So, I think their conviction in this investment is really substantial. And they're not alone, right? You're seeing it across the board. It's a very unanimous viewpoint that this infrastructure is going to be needed and it's going to be useful for many decades to come. And the other thing that gives me a lot of confidence in sort of the token economy or the AI economy growing into this is really the value creation that you're really seeing through this moment of inference scaling that we're living through right now. And in certain ways, I heard someone describe this as like, inference is this unique piece in the value chain where it's actually like the moment where you're monetizing the entire investment in sort of the whole AI application stack, from the power generation, the data centers, the chips, everything is like ultimately being monetized in this moment of inference, right? Where you're getting someone's using the product and they're using it for some value creation opportunity that could be, generating new ideas, that could, be producing this digital labor. I like to think of, the agentic economy is really a digital labor force. And, when you look at the labor economy, it's $100 trillion, economy. And so, if you just took a small percentage of that and really expanded it, the opportunity is, so infinite.
So I guess the OpenAI has just raised 120 billion. Mm-hmm. So it's like how much more room do you think there is to be investing into these really big training runs where there is a question of what's the timeline towards it? Because it's like everyone's like 120 billion. At some point that number gets too big. It's like
yes,
at least within the current.
Well, here's another way I think about it.
And I don't ask as a skeptic. I just feel like you're going to have a smart response.
Here's another way I think about it. Is I actually think about it through this like core view of like macroeconomic theory. Yeah. And I look at it through the lens of GDP, right? And I say, okay, if you look at like growth rate of GDP, I think AI has this incredible opportunity to supercharge the growth rate in GDP, and here's why. If you study GDP growth, it really comes from, there's an equation that you learn in macroeconomics 101, which is that change in GDP is equal to the change in capital plus the change in labor plus the change in technology. It's the sum of those three components. And so what is AI? AI is a massive change in technology. And then if you look at these agentic workflows, it's actually a massive boost in labor. Mm-hmm. Historically, for the history of humanity, the delta L has had to be organically grown, right? We have to, invest in this cultivation period of raising a new generation of workforce that take, 20 years to become productive, value creating members of society. The digital labor force that's created through these agentic workflows where you can actually digitally produce outcomes, digitally accomplish tasks through, these chain of thought reasoning models and, all this test time compute scaling that we're seeing. And, things like OpenClaw and, all these different like agentic workflows, it is amplifying and increasing the change in labor force. And what that's going to lead to is an unprecedented growth in GDP. And that growth in GDP is ultimately just going to create a lot more value for the economy.
So that makes sense. And it's something like, in order for the investments to keep flowing, that GDP growth will have to start coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it today, right? It's like people are paying for outcomes. And I think like the Anthropic growth case is like a really fascinating one because they've been so focused on enterprise. I think, OpenAI has an incredible product for consumer and, I think they're growing quite a bit in enterprise as well. But Anthropic has just been like more focused on enterprise than consumer. And, enterprise pays for outcomes, right? They pay for results. And what we're seeing is like, my engineering team, they love using Claude Code. We give them options on a lot of different things. They love Claude Code, right? And it's it's just like a very popular tool internally at Crusoe, and it's I think we're not the only ones that are sort of feeling that, and there's a lot of other great tools out there that are popular as well. Cognition and Cursor and Codex and all these different tools are amazing productivity boosters. But this is just the tip of the spear, and I think we're sort of seeing it across, like Claude Cowork is like very popular in our finance team and our legal team, and like a lot of these tools are just making people's lives easier, and we're able to do more with less. And because of that, you're just seeing massive growth in revenue from these AI enterprise tools.
I'm curious about what experiences you had in your life, I would suspect early on, that led you to be so good at identifying these sort of potential synergies. Like there's some way that your imagination lit up and seeing the sort of the natural gas turning into the fire and say like, wait a second, there's such an opportunity here. Like there's some sort of synthesis around efficiency or like a win-win opportunity that really suffuses how you just talk about what you're building.
I guess like, everybody has sort of like a, all these different advice to entrepreneurs, all these like different things that they might say to, folks that are kind of in the early stages of building their businesses. One thing that I would say, I think it was like Mark Andreessen that, talked about this, and he had like a couple of key characteristics that he sort of described for, successful entrepreneurs. And like, one is, this notion of being disagreeable. And like, I'm a pretty friendly guy. Like I like to joke around with people, but like if I believe something and I like build up a first principled like mindset for like why I believe it, like I'm gonna like firmly hold my position, even if everybody in the room disagrees with me. And I think that's something that we've embraced at Crusoe in terms of like, trying to promote the sense of an idea meritocracy, where it's like, present your arguments and, present facts, and everybody should like present facts to ultimately get to like a shared truth. And, that can be built and argued for with facts. And then there's another like thing that, he brings up, which, I think is like just resonated with me a lot, which is basically, having this like extreme, like deferred gratification, like, being willing to like, have just an extreme sense of deferred gratification where like, I don't need, fame, fortune, money, whatever it is that motivates you today. Like I'm willing to put off all of that because I'm so motivated by, the problem or, the thing that I'm working on. And, I think I sort of had an inverse approach early on in my career as a quant. I was planning to become like a theoretical physicist. That was like my like planned journey. That's like a very monastic life, right? You make like as a postdoc, you make like 30 grand a year or whatever, like, and you're solving like the hardest problems in the universe, right? At some point I realized that like basic science research moved very slowly, and I like didn't want to do that. And sort of abandoning that plan, I was like, oh man, I guess like getting rich, I should do that. That's like the next best thing. I ended up going into quant finance, like literally, I was like, okay, I'm good at math. These quant finance firms will pay you a lot of money to solve math problems. That was like how I ended up in that business. And, when I started my journey as an entrepreneur, I left this career in quant finance where you're getting paid a tremendous amount of money. And, I said, what, I don't really need more money. Like I'm kind of like fine. And, I just want to build something that I think is really, really interesting. And, today, I've never sold a single share of Crusoe stock. Like I've held every single share that I've ever gotten through, any sort of grants or, founding shares that I've gotten, or I've only actually bought more over the course of time. I think that's like, having these very, very high conviction, aspects like in belief in yourself and your ideas, I think can pay dividends for you over the course of time.
What's the hardest thing for you right now with sort of building Crusoe?
I think the hardest thing for us right now is effectively scaling culture, right? The company is about 1,600 people full-time today. And we have big, ambitious plans, and we want to change the world in like a huge way. And there's a lot of difficult challenges across the entire landscape of what we're focused on. I mean, one of the problems with vertically integrating is that you create such a massive problem for yourself, right? Each layer you're vertically integrating is a big problem, and then you're trying to do all the problems all at once. And so you need talented, ambitious, motivated people that have high agency, that have high, domain expertise in their vertical to be able to attack those problems. And it just like it's a huge energy draw on me to be able to, push each of the different verticals and also attract the right talent sort of, across the board. And then as you grow, you get stretched in these weird ways where, when you're 10 people in a room is a lot different than when you're 100 people in a room. It's a lot different when you're 1,000 people, spread across the world. And that's gonna be a lot bit different than when you're 10,000 people, right? And, I think trying to preserve that sense of like, doer mentality of high agency, get it done, whatever it takes, high ownership mentality, like as you grow, I think is like, it takes a lot of thoughtfulness and especially when you're trying to grow really, really quickly.
So one of the things you guys are doing to scale from a product sense is launched your new inference product. Talk to us about the decision to do that and the complexity of now kind of, as you were saying earlier, like being your own customer in a sense, of really wanting to scale that product for as a new way to grow the company.
Yeah. So when we think about, the infrastructure itself, we kind of think about it like through this notion of like, we're making a big investment. Now we want to find different ways to monetize that investment. So that was what led us to originally building an inference product. And, it initially sort of started as a bit of an experimentation where we were saying, okay, can we stand up an inference engine? Let's see what's out there in the open source. Let's try to draw on a lot of, expertise that's out there, things like VLLM and, others that, we were able to sort of build, an engine that would give sort of, could host models and run models and deliver kind of, performance across the ecosystem. Then when I said, okay, we need to really build something, we really need something to supercharge this and really make it special. I was actually introduced to a former portfolio company of yours, Atero, and I was just really impressed with, the founders of that business, Alon, Yariv, and Omer Landau. And they really impressed me with just kind of their first principles thinking in terms of, memory architecture and how they were thinking about sort of the whole data management layer across the AI infrastructure problem. And, after spending, many hours with them and talking about integrating their product with Crusoe, I thought that it could basically, one, the work Atero was doing could make the Crusoe inference product better. And two, it would make an even better product if we just had that team working on it full time. And so we made the decision and came to terms with acquiring Atero last summer. And, the team's been a phenomenal group that's really supercharged our efforts across the managed AI services and managed inference landscape. So, for us, we view this as, one of the fastest growing areas of the AI infrastructure world and a really critical piece in the overall puzzle of, how this whole infrastructure investment scales and gets monetized over the course of time. And then, I also think that we have some really unique ways of delivering inference with things like Crusoe Spark and, these massive scaled manufactured investments that we're sort of making to basically scale inference faster, more reliably, more consistently, and then leveraging, the low-level software optimizations to actually deliver the best performance with the same chip footprint.
And so what's Crusoe Spark?
Sorry. Crusoe Spark is Crusoe's fully modular, Crusoe Spark is Crusoe's modular data center effort. So we have these fully self-contained AI factories that we call Crusoe Spark. We have a 500 kilowatt unit today, and we're adding up to 2 megawatt unit that's going to ship next year. And really what it is it's we believe it's going to be a critical aspect to scaling inference, is having these small modular AI data centers everywhere.
And how small is that?
It fits on the back of a flatbed truck. You gotta think of it as like an AI factory in a box that can ship anywhere in the United States or around the world. But we're focused on the US first as a scaling platform.
It's funny. I think the first time I heard of Crusoe, your website was these like modular kind of fits on a flatbed box with wind turbines next to them. Because that was kind of the early, like you said, started from modularity. You've gone to really big, and now you're kind of returning to that modular approach. So tell us about that evolution of back to the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, maybe your question earlier about like things that impacted me from like a young age. I loved Legos.
These are just data center
so
Legos.
These are like data center Lego blocks. That's literally what we're building. And, I think when I think about the inference use case, having the ability to rapidly scale the number of units, they don't need to be fully tied together in these like giant gigawatt scale clusters. You can do very well with like much smaller clusters that are serving a lot of these large scale AI models as the application scale need, or as the applications grow in terms of scale and computing needs. It creates a lot more resilience in the infrastructure as well. I think that's an underappreciated point to this. When you think about like critical infrastructure risks, if we had like 5 data centers in the world that were like running all of the world's intelligence, like, a bad guy would be like, all right, let's like attack those 5, critical components. But if you have literal AI infrastructure that's operating, redundantly in a highly distributed, small modular capacity, it actually creates a far more resilient future of intelligent infrastructure.
How do you deal with cooling in this context?
The water-cooled version is actually that's what's shipping next year.
But that will still be on a truck.
Yes. And the current version is an air-cooled version where you basically have these giant HVAC units that basically attach to the building on site. So it's basically you have this modular building, and then the HVAC units clip onto the side, basically on site. It's a very sort of easy to do thing. And then similarly for the water cooled version, it's air cooled chillers.
When I think about your competition, I think about CoreWeave and Nebius is the top 2 that come to mind. But I also feel like we're just in this sort of supply constrained universe, and so it's kind of like everyone's just off to the races. And if you can build it, the customers are there right now. Is that an accurate, like, do you feel that way, or is there?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think about competition in the way that
VCs want to put it on a neat slide.
Sure. I mean, I just don't think about it. Frankly, I think there's probably more ways for us to work together.
Yeah.
Like us and those 2 those 2 companies that you just mentioned, than for us to work against each other. I mean, sure, there's deals we compete with other companies on. But I feel like we're like going off, building at the frontier and, helping bring humanity forward into this era of abundant intelligence. And, we're all kind of doing it together. So I actually view it more as a partnership than, we're trying to, kill some other competitor or something like that. And, in a lot of ways, we've always kind of been playing our own game, right? It's like, we think about the scaling of computing needs problem, and we think about it from, a very industrial lens of like, we need to find ways to scale the manufacturing requirements to meet the challenge of this problem. And, that involves building data centers, it involves building power plants, It involves like building these very robust operations teams that can manage the infrastructure, the inevitable failures that come from infrastructure, be able to respond to those failures, be able to prevent those failures, be able to, anticipate those failures. And I think like that overall core philosophy, has been us just playing our own game, I think. Honestly, it's an exciting moment in history. Yeah. Like, there's like very few moments that have like happened like this in human history, where there's just like a seemingly infinite opportunity in front of you. And it's again, it's not there are ways of different people competing against each other for the same opportunity, but the opportunity is expanding so quickly by servicing all of humanity that, I guess like the competition piece is like sort of, I don't know. I think it's like a human manufactured element to it or something like that.
Yeah. You've said the word humanity a few times in the past minute, and spoken about kind of the grandiose nature of what is happening. What is your just like personal take if you think of the way that AI is going to impact the world, our path to AGI, and yes, Crusoe's role in it, but also just curious personally how you feel about the future that is ahead of us?
Well, I mean, Crusoe's core mission is accelerating an abundance of energy and intelligence. So my belief is that with more intelligence, we're going to be able to invent new technologies and new solutions that are going to extend human life, that are going to improve human quality of life, that are going to eliminate, boring, redundant, mundane jobs that exist in the current economy. Mm-hmm. And people will be able to be up-leveled and be able to participate in more fulfilling career paths, and people will be able to live more fulfilling lives, pursuing, what their hopes and dreams could be, because, they're not burdened by, these mundane tasks. So, what does this mean in practice? I mean, like, I think a lot of, I think about a lot of the infectious diseases, like, I think we'll very likely have like cures to most forms of cancer, like, within 10 years, maybe it's a shorter period, but I think we're going to create massive breakthroughs in our understanding of the universe. I think we are going to have massive breakthroughs in, things like transportation and, how we think about exploring the universe. I think, we're going to have massive breakthroughs in the way that we, engineer the planet. I think we have a huge focus around sustainability. And one of the criticisms of AI is how much energy it uses. I think my philosophy is that AI is actually giving us the tool set to invent new ways of producing more power and actually geoengineering the climate. I think if we make the problem big enough, the climate change aspect, it may not be that we have to all consume less. It may actually be that we can just engineer the solution we need to create a controlled, sustainable world to live in. I'm just generally a pretty optimistic, excited about the future. I think it's going to transform people's lives, and it's going to happen quickly. And I think that's maybe the biggest risk to all this, is how fast, like, the rate of change can be uncomfortable at times. And, I think humanity has like a natural modulation that unfolds, in terms of like, do we have the technology today for everybody to just ride around in self-driving cars? Like, pretty close, but like, is that going to happen tomorrow? Like, probably not, just because like human adoption curves are not like an overnight kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, I think as we see like real meaningful breakthroughs and like the ability to, cure cancer and things like that, I think you'll see adoption, happen pretty quickly.
Amazing.
We need you on the PR team for AI.
We do.
Yeah. It's
an interesting one.
It is. And it's sad that AI has become a partisan topic, and AI infrastructure has become a partisan topic. Like, there's it's become this blue and red topic. I just like it's frustrating because it was, I think like the Biden administration was very behind sort of supporting a lot of, investments in AI infrastructure and how critical of a, race this is, in terms of like the global technology race that's unfolding. And then, as soon as the other side sort of says this is also important, then, something becomes this like partisan issue. But I think for me, I think what people often don't appreciate or realize about the AI data center build out is that if we do it in the right way, where the AI data center, partners, providers, players are basically investing in the energy infrastructure to support their own needs, it actually creates this massive energy abundance. Because what happens is, like in our case, oftentimes we'll build the power we need for the data center when it's running at peak load. Well, guess what? We're running at peak load like 0.1% of the time, which means the other 99.9% of the time, we have excess energy that we can sell to the grid. We can actually lower the overall cost for ratepayers. And what does that mean for local ratepayers? It means their energy costs are going to come down. It means their energy costs are going to get cheaper because there's more energy available. And I think people need to get away from this like fixed mindset that if someone is, consuming a bunch of energy, that it's somehow taking away from your energy.
There's that great quote of like, one day we want to have energy that's too cheap to meter. And I think we're on our way there in the sense of there's also going to be tokens one day that are too cheap to meter. Of all of this is creating incredible opportunity for the proliferation of this technology. And it's awesome to see Crusoe as a part of it.
Yeah, totally.
Amazing.
No, I love that quote. Yeah.
Chase, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
It was great.
Yeah.